Perfect. Well, like the internet I have here in my house can be temperamental, and I don't use my wife's laptop too often, so I'm used to working outdoors, not playing with technology.
Of course. It's quite a room you got over there. There's lots of CDs. Is it DVDs, music?
Yeah,
What is
it's
it?
DVDs, my video games, and a Transformers collection.
Ah, what
So
do you?
it's
Yeah, that's
it's
cool.
my office. It's like kind of my quiet space. The only place in the house where my daughter doesn't understand why we can't open all the toys in the boxes.
Have has she played with any of them?
Oh, totally. Well, I have a bunch out of the box, like from when I was her age. So they don't hold their value anymore. So like her and I totally will play with them and have fun and goof around. So, and
Ah,
then my father, we just actually recently, my wife and I moved into the home we're in now. Um, and my dad brought me all my stuff out of Florida from his house. And apparently he kept a lot of things from when I was her age. So she had quite the Christmas surprise early, with just all these different toys to get to play with.
yeah, nice. Sort of like a memory capsule.
Yeah, yeah, kind of. It was a weird little trip down memory lane.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. I mean, it's yeah, it was interesting. What did you what did you think of the podcast I did with Jocelyn and Josh?
It's funny. I know of them. The guy that they either still work for or used to work for, Shane Adams. Him and I got to meet and compete against each other a couple years back. So where I'm at now, I'm in Bastrop, Texas. So there's a medieval festival out here that my team has jousted at for the last 8, 9 years, and the owner is a very big jousting enthusiast. So he wanted to put together a real tournament, like a actual, where other competitors come in. So I think it was 2016. Shane and some of his guys came in and competed, and Charlie Andrews and a couple of his guys came in, and we had this greatly huge tournament. And Shane and I actually get along really well. I actually like him quite a bit, and Charlie too. Charlie and I built like this weird frenemies relationship over the years, but I've come to grow and respect them and enjoy hanging out with them every now and again. So Josh and Jacqueline were not part of the team that came to compete with us. So, I know of them because of social media and stuff like that, and but never had the pleasure of meeting them.
Yeah, because it's. I also spoke to do you know Andre Sinau?
Again, I know the name, never met them.
Because he runs this thing called Armored Combat League, and then he ran this TV show called Night Fight. And I think one of the guys that he worked with, let me remember his name. Just give me 1 second. I'm looking him up.
I believe it was Charlie Andrews because,
Yeah.
yeah, because it was Night Fight on History Channel. Funny thing is, I actually interviewed with their producer to possibly get on that show, but unfortunately, I guess I'm not competitive enough or vibrant enough personality that they wanted more chest thumpers on their show or something along those lines. I don't know.
Yeah. But so I mean, it was interesting talking to you. But like before we had this interview, that you seem to be you have your hat in like multitude of different things, and
Yeah, well, you were mentioning when we kind of talked via Messenger that you like really interviewing people that chase passions, and for the last 20 years, that's all I've ever done. And it's interesting what you gain for that experience to what you give up to be able to do things like that. But it was funny. I was driving in the car yesterday, just randomly thinking about that of like all these different things I've gotten to do over my adult life, and it's pretty cool to be able to say I've done all these different things or participated or have gotten to enjoy. And because I've traveled the United States for as long as I have, I've met so many good people. I have a lot of different really great friends that are spread out across the country, which is sad when you choose to anchor down into one location. But still, it's great having all these vibrant experiences and people in your life, and now I'm 43 and I have a 3-year-old, and I was thinking about this too, that I ran around doing all these cool things and doing this different stuff. So now with my daughter, I'm happy to be at home. I'm happy to participate with her, and I don't feel like I'm missing out on the world or that I don't get to do cool things. It's like, no, I've already done all those really cool things. I still get to do really cool things, And now I have this little person that's holding my genetics that maybe I can impart some knowledge to, and maybe if I do my job right, she'll chase her passions when she gets older, because that's the other thing is like I gave up monetary gain to be able to do this. I spent 20 years living in a horse trailer.
What was it that sort of made you in particular switch from doing your passion rather than the money?
I can't say if I ever had that thought of I got to get the money or so. Growing up, my father was very much the typical, for lack of a better term, leave it to beaver generation. The man runs the household. He goes and works. He comes back. Yeah, and that's what you do. You get a good government job. You get a pension. You get a white picket fence. And since my teenage years, I always rebelled against that. I rebelled against like school. Like I love subjects that I'm interested in, but I would get very frustrated with things that I felt had no sway to anything that I wanted to do with my life. So when I get out of high school, I start just kind of bouncing around between, the typical run-of-the-mill jobs. I was a short order cook in an amusement park. I worked for UPS. I was learning how to do computer repair. And it was nice to have those jobs, but none of them made me feel good about myself. I even went back to college at one point and worked really hard and got, B's and A's for that semester and got out of those classes. And I'm like, I feel so unfulfilled, like all that work, all that push, and I don't care. Like, I don't feel good about it. I don't feel like, wow, that made me happy. Now I'm a giant nerd, as you can tell from the background here. And when I was living in Florida at the time, working these jobs, I was part of a reenactment group that did Renaissance and medieval reenactment. We did armored combat and rapier combat and things of that sort. And I loved it. Had a good time with it. That was kind of like my escape from reality, I guess you could say. And it was athletic. It tied in all the things that I really enjoyed. And when I was living in Florida, I got a call from a Renaissance festival up in Ohio offering me a part. And I literally dumped all my stuff in storage and took off. I had no idea what my future held. I had no idea what I was going to do, but it certainly was more appealing to go and have that experience than to continue loading boxes in a truck day in and day out, trying to scrape together a living that, hey, maybe one day I'll get to drive a truck too and live this monotonous existence. So, like I don't know if I ever actively made that choice per se, but I think it's always been part of me, from my teenage years forward of like what drove me forward. I always wanted to engage in things that made my heart sing, if that makes any sense.
So is your main thing as a whole, everything sort of gears around being a horse trainer? Is that what it
kind of happened that way, I guess. So when I went up to do that show in Ohio, I met the joust company that I belong to now. And I started training with them, and I've heard it been called, like you could say it's like a conversion moment. Sometimes when people find religion and they're just all in and it fulfills every facet of their life, that's what happened the first time I started interacting with horses. And so my story is unique in our company because I was doing full contact jousting after 5 weeks of training, never having ridden horses before. Which is not normal. Like it usually takes people 6 to 8 months or more to train and get ready to do our shows. So I was an anomaly, but I was so young and spry that it never occurred to me that, oh, this isn't normal. I was just, happy to be doing it. So excited, just trying so hard to make myself better. And I get to the next show, which was Minnesota. And I met some girls that worked for the company that were very talented horsewomen. And they started showing me the technical acumen of riding horses. And, like you could equate it to like dressage or hunter jumpers, reiners, something that where you go into the show ring and try to show technical proficiency as opposed to like the old Western cowboy movies where they just smack the horse on the ass and scream really loud and the horse goes running off in blind fury. So that technical acumen absolutely enthralled me on top of my giant nerddom screaming with delight that I'm engaging in full contact jousting. I just thought it was the coolest thing. So yeah, like everything that I am now, that was its starting point in a way, because it drove me to learn more about the horses, and I got very lucky that the gentleman that owns this company was a very talented horseman to begin with, and very much believed in a very technical presentation as well. So it gave me this branch, like to go to other horse trainers and to really learn my craft to where I'm at now, where I'm running a program to try and help veterans on top of a regular training program. But through all of that, through that love of training, that love of the horses and the jousting, because of all my traveling, I actually had a little bit more time on my hands to explore my humanity, to do all these different things. And it just gave me gateways to try a whole bunch of different stuff. Between my martial arts, swing dancing, some different artistic endeavors, just it really allowed me to just explore myself, if that makes any sense.
What is a common misconception with regards to horse training?
It depends on what circle you travel in, I would guess, because if you were to talk to an animal rights person, they would probably tell you how mean it is to make the horses work and to do all these different things, and you're just the worst person in the universe. Or you might go to a dressage person and they're like, horses are majestic, and maybe, they have all these different tools to try and make the horse conform into a certain way. And if they don't, well, we'll just use the tool stronger, or, and that could be any trainer. I shouldn't pick on dressage specifically. I didn't necessarily mean it that way, but, and you get to other horse trainers, like there's a big wave in the horse community called natural horsemanship, where everything you're doing is natural. But I've never liked that term, because last I checked, I've yet to see a horse out in the wild run up, grab a saddle, throw it on their back, and grab a human and throw it on their back and say, cool, we're going for a ride, but those people in that circle go on about, well, we're using more natural methods and things of that sort. So the misconception can be a very big umbrella, because there's a lot of perspectives on it. So it is hard to, I'd say, single that out in one way. But maybe I'll try, like we could say that maybe a general misconception is you get on the horse and you hammer their sides and pull their face and they're going to do anything you want. Whereas I like to equate horse training as you're trying to create a situation of it being a partner dance, where anything that you would like them to do, you're trying to create the invitation that they just can't help but go there, because it feels so good to accept that invitation. It's kind of like a leader and follower relationship in dancing and partner dancing, that your partner can say no at any time, but you're just trying to create these invitations that are just so good, and it feels so good to accept them. And it creates, you kind of build a relationship of success. But ideally too, with horses, you help them feel comfortable and safe about the situation that they're under. So maybe that perhaps could be narrow. I guess maybe for laymen, I would say that would be maybe a misconception.
Okay. And so one thing that scares me about horses is if I ever did ride one, I'll be a bit worried about it kicking me off and me turning into Chris Reeves. What is often the reason for those sort of accidents to happen?
And it is a legitimate worry, because they are horses after all, and they do have their own personalities, their own opinions. But also you have to remember they're animals of prey. So when a situation to them is stressful, or perhaps in their mind life-threatening, they're going to react accordingly. Now, through training, you do everything you can to try and reduce the possibility of that occurring. That's done by building trust with this horse, that they can trust your leadership, your guidance, that if a bad situation comes up, you'll help them out and you'll help get them out of it. So any good trainer, so if you were to come to me saying, hey, I would really like to ride a horse, but these are my fears, these are my concerns, I would make sure to put you on a horse that is absolutely bomb-proof, which they do exist, where they're just like nothing bothers them. They allow you to make mistakes. They allow you to explore the relationship. But also, as your instructor, I would be down there giving you cues and ideas to play with and help you navigate how to effectively communicate with your equine partner. Where you go to like maybe a trail riding stable and they just throw you on and kick you out there and hope for the best. And they try to do that as well, where, oh, we'll put you on this horse or that horse and try to match you up as best you can. But I always feel like, again, as an instructor, it's my job to try and pair you up with a partner that will give you the highest percentage of success. But also, too, I wouldn't force you to get on the horse. I would allow you to interact with the horse in the way that you see fit, and I would help you build a relationship from the ground before I'd ever just throw you up there on their back, you know. And again, this holds true because a lot of the work I do with veterans, they come in with PTSD and they have different social anxieties that if you put them in a situation, as you just described, where the horse might throw them off or throw them into a fence or act negatively towards them, then in my mind, it's only going to trigger that stress hormone, those negative reactions, and create a very unhappy relationship. So again, everything I would want to do is build it from the ground up and start small and move at the pace that both you and your equine partner are most comfortable with.
And what's the whole process of breaking a horse, as they say? Like, how does that happen? Do you get a whip out, or do you massage it? What do you do?
So that actually, back to the question you asked about misconceptions of horses, right? So breaking a horse is actually an old school term. I've heard it associated with old school cowboys from prior to the turn of the 19th century, Wild West kind of era. So the idea is that you take the horse and you absolutely break their spirit to where they don't want to fight you, and they don't want to argue with you, and they don't, like, their personality's gone in a way. Where a lot of the technique has evolved over time now, where, again, going back to what I was trying to describe of creating a partnership, that, you know, yes, you're trying to put yourself in the leadership position, but I don't want to suck the life from them to where their true personalities don't get a chance to express themselves. So when you're starting a horse off, you're showing them how to work with you. Now, horses respond to physical cues. If a horse wants to move another horse, they're going to bump into them. They're going to push them around. They're going to do all kinds of different stuff through physical interaction. So a lot of good trainers will try to emulate aspects of that physical interaction. It just, you know, that's my life. And you learn how to roll with the punches and just try to figure out how to make the best situation you can. And it's fun, like having her around the horses. Like she's going to turn 4 in November, and she gets to play with them and interact with them. And actually, I'll try to remind you and send you a couple pictures in Messenger of her interacting with the horses, kind of going back to how do we get them started and how do we build confidence in them and leadership. So, and I think you mentioned a whip in there. So there is a tool called a lunge whip. I use what's called a stick and a rope, where the stick is about 3 feet long, and then the rope is about an additional 6. Now, the idea is that stick and rope is an extension of my arm. It's not a weapon. It's not something that I want them to be fearful of. But in order to interact with them, I want them operating at a certain distance, one that's safe, especially when they're brand new and green and potentially might choose to be aggressive or things of that sort. But ultimately, I'm looking to gain the leadership position by moving their feet around in the way that horses interact with each other in the wild. If you ever watch an alpha horse, they're pushing other members of the herd around. So I try to emulate that position. And eventually we'll use a tool called a round pen, which is it's exactly what it sounds like, just a big pen that's circular. And I'll work in the center, and I'll get them to move in certain ways, change gaits from a walk to a jog or a trot to a canter or a lope, depending on the discipline that you're in. They have different vocabulary for the same movements. And we build our relationship from there. But then also I teach the horse how to come and face and interact with me. There's a lot of really good trainers out there that I draw from, that I also take lessons myself to continually try to sharpen my own personal tool set. You know, I never adopt the position of, oh, I know it all and it's exact science. Horses have their own personalities, so it's your job as a trainer to learn that horse's personalities, what their nuances might be, and then how to get the best from them, how to figure out what job will suit them the best.
And is it different types of breeds of horses that you have to be careful of, like in their own sort of temperament, like there are with dogs, like you get pedigrees and?
Yeah, maybe I would say maybe in a small sense. You have some smaller horses like Arabs or thoroughbreds that are considered hot-blooded, a little bit more reactive and very high energy. You've got some of your endurance horses that same thing, just have a lot of energy. You have draft horses, which are the big heavy horses. They're considered cold-blooded because their tendency is to be a little bit more docile.
Okay.
So a lot of times I think, yeah, there's going to be a natural personality in there. They're going to be high energy or low energy. And then the training can kind of help them navigate that energy and express it more effectively, where they're calmer despite the fact that maybe they're a high energy horse. One of the pictures I'll send you is of my daughter with a horse that when I started her would turn herself inside out because she was so fearful of being interacted with, because prior to her coming to our program, she was a trail horse. And on the trails, people don't have steady hands. They don't have steady legs. Maybe they pull really hard. And it just was an unpleasant existence for her. So she was very fearful of that interaction coming from me. And I showed her that our relationship will have more benefit for her, that, hey, if you're soft and nice with me, my hands are soft and nice with you. I'm not going to hammer your sides to get you underway. I'm going to use rhythm and timing to communicate with you and make the overall experience much calmer, much nicer, to the point now where I was doing lessons yesterday, Sunday, and my daughter comes up to me when I was done, and she just takes the reins and she walks that horse back all the way to the stalls, and hooked her up. And the horse was just not even a care in the world. It was calm, quiet, just easygoing. Whereas 6-7 months ago, I would never let her do that. I would never let her take that horse because that horse was so unsure of herself.
Yeah. So what that's because I've got horses. What do you make of? So you think a lot of the accidents with horses come from the temperament of the horse and like someone not looking after them properly, and because of
it's hard to say because I don't work at every barn. In my experience, when I've seen horses have an issue, more often than not, it is rider related. But it also can be in combination of things. Again, sometimes a horse gets nervous about something, they freak out, the rider freaks out, and now it's just one gigantic freak out. Whereas, for example, there's a horse that I'm training here that is exactly that, freaks out about everything, and it previously has bucked off riders and it was just an absolute nightmare. And I've been working him and same thing, building his confidence from the ground, and eventually built his confidence from the saddle to where we were on a big open field and something in this ground scared him and he went to buck. But because my demeanor never changed, the response habits I created on this horse, meaning that, hey, when I do this, you do that. When he started getting himself into trouble, I asked him to do something he was familiar with. And initially he started out scared, but then because we've done this maneuver a million times over, he was like, oh, I'm comfortable with that. Oh, there's nothing to be afraid of because you're asking me to do this thing that I know I can be successful at all the time. So it's a matter of creating outs and response habits that if you do get into trouble, you have options.
Okay.
If that makes any.
What I find, what one thing I've noticed whenever I've seen horses and their riders is why you wear a lot of horse riders, they wear these funny clothes when they're on the horse. Is there a reason for it?
I tend not to. You want some water? All right, go give me a cup. I'll get you some water. So like the traditional disciplines like dressage, hunter jumper, English, they tend to wearing tighter pants, the tall boots, sometimes helmets, sometimes not. When they get into the show ring, they want to wear the more formalized outfit. They have the top hats, the tails, all the different things. I don't have the exact reason. It's got to do with presentation. The Western disciplines want a more Western look. So when I've shown horses in reining, I've had to wear, a cowboy hat, a buttoned-up collared shirt, jeans, a belt, and the style of boots that we wear for that discipline. So, yeah, as far as like a perfect explanation, I really couldn't offer one up because my training for the longest time has been outside the norm of the horse world. That when I go to train horses, I wear jeans and a t-shirt and a ball cap, you know? So, but that's just me.
Well, because I've, how does the structure of like being involved in training horses and horse riding work? Because I've all I know is the Royal Ascot, the Grand National, and people riding horses. That's all I know about horse riding. And like I've seen the Olympics, and one of our royals has won a few medals in it. That's
Yep.
all I know.
Well, again, the horse world is expansive. So there's really not a one size all fits answer. Mainly, again, like dressage, they want certain types of movements and presentation from their horses, especially when they're showing, and when they're judged, they're graded on the execution of each particular maneuver. You have reining, Western Pleasure, which also does similar types of shows where you get into the ring, you show your partner through a series of predetermined maneuvers. Each maneuver is graded, and then you kind of fit your scoring in from that, and that'll determine who's top and who's bottom and things of that sort. But then you can go to Colorado and you'll have guys that go out to like hunt elk, and they're going to have trail horses that are not as technically precise as some of these other horses, but they get on those trails. They're confident, they're reliable, they know their jobs really, really well, but they're not necessarily being graded on their technical acumen. It's more of like, oh, great, this horse is super reliable out here on this trail, and I know I can trust him. You could go out to the steppes of Mongolia, and you have folks that live with those horses every day, and it's part of their natural existence. But they hunt off of them. The Mongolians are renowned for being horse archers, so you have that aspect, and they're not necessarily being graded on how pretty their horse is and what they're doing. So again, it's a very, very big tent of what to do, especially for when I'm teaching people, and I have people coming to me wanting to have their animals or trained or whatever. I try to find out what it is you would like to do, so that way I could just create the best possible relationship with.
What state are you in, and what city?
I'm in Bastrop, Texas now.
Oh, is that near Austin, Texas?
It is. It's about 30 minutes away.
Okay. Ooh.
Which is funny because I didn't know I was going to end up living here, but I mean, it's weird because of my horse training background. When the pandemic hit and struck down the performance venues I'm used to going to, the guys that I work for now just were like, well, you're stuck. Do you want to train some of our horses? And I made them a proposal, and then they liked what I was doing, and they said, hey, we really want to keep you around. So all of a sudden, I have now a regular full-time job, and my wife's a nurse, so for her it was easy to get a job, and then all of a sudden we bought a house in Bastrop, Texas, and that was not the normal plan. We were living in Eureka Springs, Arkansas, and we were supposed to go home, and I was gonna actually possibly open up a martial arts gym with a couple guys and do that, but then everything completely changed, and here I am back to doing the very thing I love doing. So.
What kind of martial arts did you get into?
Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is a grappling art, Judo, which is also a grappling art, but more focused on takedowns and throws, and Muay Thai, which is a kickboxing art out of Thailand.
I mean, judo perhaps more practical in self-defense because, I mean, if you throw someone on concrete with those throws, it's going to bloody hurt.
It's true. In my opinion, there are practical points to every art. If I were going to staple one though, for like just a layman who just wants to be a hobby person, I would actually say Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And my reason being is that, yes, you're right. If you're a good judoka, you can dump somebody on the concrete and that should be the end of it. Now in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, we do learn judo as well, not as extensively, but it is part of the vocabulary because the origin of the art was from judo. So, but Jiu-jitsu is what happens after the throw, how to maintain top position in a grappling situation. If somebody manages to pin you to the ground, how to get out from underneath them and get back into a more dominant position and get away. How to affect chokes, where if your attacker, again, isn't skilled and you put a choke on them, you put them to sleep, they're not going to come and get you anymore. And especially and again, strictly my opinion, so it doesn't have to be taken as gospel. But for women's self-defense, I think it is highly applicable because one of the primary defensive positions, which we refer to as guard, which is where I'm on my back and I have somebody in between my legs. In a woman's situation, if that was a woman on the ground, that would be the primary position for somebody to try and sexually assault her.
Yeah.
Where previously considered, I'm in such a vulnerable position, it's actually a very strong position, and women can defend themselves very, very effectively from that position. I train and have trained with women that are literally half my weight and are so skilled that their transitions, that like they beat me very handily because they're so highly skilled and highly trained. So I would say jiu-jitsu edges out judo in that regard for those reasons. But judo does practice what's called the nawasa technique, which is ground stuff, arm locks, chokes, and joint locks, but they don't focus on it as extensively as Brazilian jiu-jitsu does. But both are very, like, if somebody was going to train, I'd absolutely train in any of those arts. Any one of them will help you and teach you something positive. But like for myself, like my daughter actually just started training a little bit with me in jiu-jitsu, and for her it's going to be just like brushing her teeth. It's just going to be part of our everyday, because I believe that will help her the most. But again, like if I met a really high level martial artist in another art that had a different opinion, I wouldn't sit there and go, you're wrong. I would honestly, they're probably right, because they're highly trained in that art and they see the positives in it. So I think any kind of training is better than no training.
It was quite funny because I watched a YouTube channel on like different martial arts, and like they say with certain ones that are too flashy, a lot of them don't do pressure testing. Whilst the ones you mentioned like judo and Brazilian jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai, there's a lot of pressure testing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in the fight, when the pressure's on, someone wants to kill you. They want to hurt you. You haven't got time to do all those moves, and like no one's going to let you do that. You just got to make it quick and simple and practical.
Well, and as you said, we pressure test it, and it gives you a practical understanding of the moves, the moments, the aggression level. What does that feel like? So my wife, when we met, and the reason why she's my wife is because I took her to a training class, and she loved it. And we left there, and she looks right at me. She's like, "Babe, that was a great date." I'm like, "I'm marrying you. I'm keeping you." So we, but when she was training with me, because I am twice her size, I had her where I would get in a mount position, which is me on top of her, and I kind of let my weight settle on her. Now, for women, more often than not, and this is not all women, this is just my experience with the people I've trained with. So again, I will happily admit if my perception of this is incorrect. But for a lot of women that I have met, that when they get somebody who's twice their size on top of them, sweaty, breathing on them, and smushing them to the ground, it's a mentally horrifying experience. It is not good. And a lot of times in a self-defense situation, maybe somebody took a self-defense class where they learned to rake the eyes or, stick a thumb up the nose or whatever they come up with. But then when the moment happens and that big, nasty, horrible person is on top of them, and all those, like, they freeze up, they lock up because they don't know what to do. Where with my wife and other women that I've trained with, I put them in that position, but I also am not trying to be a jerk and just totally grind them into existence, because I know my skill level is different than theirs. So I'm putting that pressure on, but also giving them room to work a little bit. And they know the second they say, tap, or they tap me, I'm done. I'm getting off of them. I'm getting clear and giving them all the space they need. So it gives them the ability to navigate these emotional fears safely, because they know that the second they tap, all the pressure comes off, that nobody's in there to try and hurt them. And for my wife, that was a big thing, because she handles it better now when bigger guys, are trying to use their strength to dominate her and dominate in the correct sense of pressure testing, not, big, strong, gonna smash you kind of thing. So yeah, that's exactly, why I believe these arts are really good for that pressure testing. Even Muay Thai, where, it's strictly a standing art, but there are clinches and grapples and takedowns within it that translates so beautifully to judo and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu that, but they learn the timing and the distance needed to affect good punches and good kicks and everything else. Well, hi there.
It's yeah, she can join. Let's do it with her in the whole thing, and let's see what happens.
Yeah, well, she'll hang out as long as she likes to, and then she'll venture off to see what else there is to see. But and again, like you said, I think you have the right of it that the pressure testing is so important when it comes to the arts.
And what about knife defenses? I mean, that is, I looked into that a bit on YouTube, and they said effectively most of the knife defenses are basically useless that are taught.
Yeah, I would agree with that, especially anything coming off of YouTube. They're definitely take it with a grain of salt. I have never trained knife training per se. It's not something that the gyms I train at focus at. So I can't say that I would have any practical knowledge as far as that goes. However, from my fencing and sword fighting background, I'd say I have a cursory understanding as to what kind of distance I might need to keep. But I am pretty certain that if somebody came at me with a knife, I would probably get cut multiple times, if I was going to attempt to subdue the attacker. Otherwise, I try and keep my distance and not let them get close to me.
Safety first. But I mean, it's a virus. It's a strange one in a way. There's some people saying it's nothing, some saying it's something. But also, there was a funny news article where there was an influencer on Instagram with 1 million followers who said, "Oh, it's nothing."
I saw that, yes.
And then he contracts it and he dies. Well, I don't know what to say about that.
Well, he apparently had pre-existing heart condition, and COVID does attack the heart in certain instances, depending on what mutation hits you. I mean, if we can dive into the political. It doesn't bother me a little bit, and it's unfortunate that a pandemic like of this nature or a virus of this nature has become such a political thing. But interestingly enough, if you go back through history and look at the world's pandemics, we're almost repeating ourselves because people reacted exactly the same way that, the government, whatever the governing body is, tries to impose restrictions, and the populace kind of resists back, going, "You're impeding my freedoms. How dare you?" I actually just got done listening to a earlier podcast this morning talking about when the plague was ravaging Europe, and that Venice actually set up on their little islands in their harbor quarantine stations where they would set these buildings up, and sailors coming in from other countries had to live in these things for 40 days before they were allowed to actually step foot into Venice. And people argued and resisted and weren't happy about it. When Athens got hit with their plague, and this is in antiquity, they went through the same troubles and trials and tribulations of people trying to balance personal freedom and personal responsibility, and sometimes getting the two confused. And that's the tough part about this virus, is that it's so unpredictable that a lot of people, for the most part, shrug it right off and go on with their lives. But there is a percentage of the population that it absolutely ravages. And for them, it's a nightmare. And for those people that have lost somebody to this thing, it's serious. It's a serious monster. And it's tough. Like I got a fever a couple weeks ago, and we freaked out in the house here, wondering, oh shit, is this it? Is this the thing? And for me, my fever was gone the next day, and I got tested, and everything was fine, thankfully. And of course, my wife's experiences so she deals with post-COVID patients. She sees the aftermath, and it is harrowing experience for those that have survived it but have long-term effects. It's even more, and a lot of people don't understand what a toll it's taking on the healthcare workers. My wife carries a lot of emotional baggage coming home because most healthcare workers are exceptionally empathetic and are there to try and help people. And when you feel like you can't help them, it hurts. It's hard, and they carry that home with them. And it's even more frustrating for them to see people acting so recklessly and cavalier that as these hospitals are, here we go again, they're starting to fill up again. And yet something as simple as wearing a mask is like a massive issue, when masks have the possibility to reduce the severity on several fronts. That either you avoid the infection entirely, or if you do get infected, the viral load is reduced, that your probability to survive this is increased. But yet, all people want to scream about is their freedoms. Like, I train jujitsu in a mask. I train Muay Thai in a mask. I do full rounds of hard cardio with a mask on.
Okay.
It's possible. It's not a hard thing. So, again, for any of your listeners, like, I don't mean to politicize. All I can speak from is my home experience and how much it affects my wife, and how hard it is on her, because it's hard for her to watch these people go through this, and other healthcare workers that are trying desperately to stem the tide and keep people alive, but then yet people don't want to seem to be kept alive because they have a perspective about personal freedoms. So it's tough.
Yeah. Did you have any of these anti-mask protests? Because in London, we would get like thousands of people coming in doing these anti-mask protests.
Yeah, I haven't seen them personally. I know in Austin, when a lot of protests broke out over police brutality and BLM and aspects of Antifa, a lot of that happened. But there was also a lot of counter protesting, Trump rallies and anti-mask rallies, as you're describing. So I have made it a point to stay away from all of it. And thankfully, Bastrop is, a very quiet town. And also, my job with the horses keeps me very busy. So I just interact with them, and it keeps me a little bit more sane and out of trouble. It amazes me, and I certainly have my strong opinions about it. But, I try to, for the moment, I try to take care of those around me. I try to take care of the veterans in my program, the people that I train with when I go to jiu-jitsu, and my family. And that's, I guess, the best I can do.
Who has, so it's interesting you mentioning all these different things, and like family, and like, I mean, it is a difficult time for everyone up there.
Mm-hmm.
And who do you look as an example during these difficult times, like a
As
hero?
far as what, like a mentor to myself personally, or just like a political figure, or?
Like a mentor in terms of like handling these difficult situations to help you go through it.
So my professor, which black belts in jiu-jitsu are referred to as professors. So the gentleman I train with here, Alex, I look up to him a little bit, and he definitely like has the mindset of living without fear, like acknowledging that the virus is real, but I'm still going to try and live my life. But then some of the guys that I train the horses with, and work with them, one of them is a medical professional, so we'll talk about it a little bit. Honestly, my wife and I try to take information from various sources, and then together we try to make the best decision we can for ourselves to not necessarily live in fear, but also live responsibly to make sure that we're protecting ourselves as best we can and also protecting others. So like right now, like I love training jiu-jitsu, but I only go 2 nights a week just so that way I can train a little bit and maybe reduce my chances of coming into contact with the disease. But thankfully, like our gym, we do temperature checks and if you feel remotely sick, don't show up and things of that sort. But still, I fully acknowledge that I am making the active choice to take a risk. But I also, like, we train with our masks on. We don't, we're not sitting in an enclosed building without any protection or whatever. So I try to mitigate the risk as best I can. Like, we choose to send our daughter to an outdoor school because, again, it's well ventilated. They have COVID policies in place that we think are good. And, it's very important for my daughter to have the ability to interact with other kids, and as it is for any child. But if she was a student in a school right now, I probably wouldn't send her because of the enclosed space, high number of kids, tightly packed together, and that concerns me. So, like I say, we try to weigh and measure.
What are you gonna try and do once this is all over? Like, what lessons have you learned, and what are you gonna what are you hoping to plans and put together? What's your goal in
My
terms?
goal is to grow the veterans program that I have working on right now, and to increase my range as a horse trainer, which is all I'm focused on now. And I'm striving to get my jiu-jitsu black belt at some point. So I'm one of the very, very lucky few where my life is not radically altered by COVID because of the environments I'm working under right now. Like, I'm not around a lot of people. I don't have to go to an office. I'm doing the very job that I would be doing this if it was a normal world. So it's very weird that this opportunity came about amidst the pandemic. And for the first time ever, I'm not living in a horse trailer, but my wife and I bought our very first home together. Like, under these circumstances, it's a weird feeling. So when we get to the other side of this thing, the more I can do to help the program grow and help other people, and always just try to make sure to pay it back to society as best I'm able to by being productive, but also if I'm in a position, reach out a helping hand to somebody. That's the direction I'm going to try and move towards.
And what has been the biggest lesson you've learned about people during this pandemic?
I've had a mix. It's some people can be exceptionally generous, and some people absolutely suck and are reckless and heartless individuals. So, which I think that's just humanity in general, but I think it is amplified even more right now, and especially in the States, by the pandemic, by politics, social media, and a lot of its forms. That we don't know how to be people, like, just nice to each other anymore. Everybody's too busy sitting online and being anonymous and having no repercussions for saying something horrible to somebody that you probably wouldn't say to their face more often than not, So that, at least in my mind, that's what I've learned about people. But again, like, the people I've surrounded myself with are not those people, and I stay to them. And the people in our program are not those people. Like, when they come to work with us and we do our therapy days with them, we don't talk about polarizing things. That's not the point. We're there to enjoy the love of horses and love of, camaraderie, whatever it may be, and try to stay focused on positives instead of negatives.
Of course. So you've done quite, bloody hell, you've done so many disciplines, and it's like you're if MMA was life, you would be it.
Yeah, probably. Like, I've always said, like, I'm a jack of all trades and a master of none. And it's fantastic that I've had all these experiences. Like, I spent quite a number of years swing dancing, and I loved it. And Austin has a vibrant swing dancing scene,
Oh,
and so does Dallas. And Dallas is one of my favorite places to go to, with some of my favorite teachers that they haven't never met my wife. So when the world kind of loosens back up and we're able to function, and hopefully we've made it through safely, I'm taking both my wife and daughter up there, and same thing, for my daughter, like, she loves to dance around the house. So hopefully maybe swing dancing will be something that she'll enjoy incorporating into her life as she gets older. Because also I think, swing dancing, as much as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, is another way that teaches really proper interaction between people, how to be polite and respectful and courteous and kind towards each other. So that's definitely something I look forward to bringing back into our life when we're able to.
I'm going to ask you another more interesting question, and this
Sure,
may
I
be
love them.
so from each of your passions in life, would you be able to tell me what is a lesson you've learned from them? Like, one lesson that you've learned, and it's like, ooh.
Live for the moment is the one lesson that I learned early on, where you enjoy every moment you can, because it's not going to be the same afterwards. Each moment is different. Uh-oh, here comes trouble. As I said, no moment ever stays the same.
Hello.
So you learn to appreciate it. You know, like this sometimes might drive me crazy, you know, but this
Hello.
this little monkey here is the only one I have, and I love her to pieces. And these are the things that I'll remember when I'm older, you know, and when she's off running around with her friends and doesn't want to see her old man anymore, you know, I'll remember times like this and just chuckle to myself, you know. You know, and then actually that's another thing that I definitely say that jousting and horse training has taught me: patience. Really how to be more patient and understanding of a person. Like especially when she was a little itty bitty and nonverbal, I learned how to read her body language well and be more patient with her and how to see what she needs and what she needs to do. So it's that, yeah, it's definitely that living for the moment and how to be patient and appreciate each moment. I can absolutely say is the takeaway from my adult life, you know, as a jouster. And we haven't even talked about my years as a professional wrestler. So, you know, I did that too while I was jousting. And I mean, you know, who can sit here and actively say that, oh yes, I'm a jouster, I'm a professional wrestler, I'm a swing dancer, I'm a, you know, martial artist. Like whose life does that? You know?
Many.
And somewhere in there I'm a dad and I'm a husband, you know?
But you'll wrestle anyone that gets in the way of your wife and your daughter.
Nope. The good thing is they'll know how to do it themselves. You know, I'll always have their back and I will protect them. But you know, hopefully, if I can do it right, she'll know how to stand up on her own too and protect herself.
Uh,
As you
what
can see, she's got good kicks.
definitely. Boom, boom. What so what has been the what what was how could you sum up your experience as a professional wrestler? How did that happen? And what level did you get to? And did you speak to The Rock or Chris Benoit or any of these other WWE wrestlers?
So I got into professional wrestling through jousting, interestingly enough, because one of the guys that I jousted with, the guy who initially taught me, was a huge fan of professional wrestling, as was I. So we totally would nerd out about that. And and through him, I met a guy named Lance Michaels down in Florida who we started training under. So through him, like for me, wrestling, I was just a fan, loved it, and I just wrestled because it was fun and the independent scene was fun, and I was what you know I was what we call a mark, where you know I never had aspirations to go to the WWE or anything like that. I just enjoyed getting to learn the craft because also like learning how to fall and protect myself and sell and perform is very applicable to what we do with the jousting and how to make that look good and how to make the shows really presentable. So and actually it's funny, I am the only guy that I can say that because of my professional wrestling, I learned how to do. Are you familiar with Jeff Hardy, the wrestler?
Let me check. I'm gonna look. I think I know who he is, but let me.
Look up Jeff Hardy Swanton Bomb if you got your computer there.
So is it G?
Jeff.
Oh, okay.
Hardy.
I am
Okay?
not, but I'm intrigued to find out about him.
All right. He's an interesting cat. I was a huge fan of his early on in my younger days. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And if you're using YouTube, if you type in Knight Swanton Bomb in armor, that will give you something interesting to look at.
Oh, oh, so he does these like funny acrobatics, effectively.
Yeah, he does. He's a very talented wrestler. Now his move, the Swanton Bomb, is off the top rope where he flips over and lands on a guy. So if you look under that heading on YouTube, it's a video of me doing the same exact move off the back of a horse in my suit of armor.
Oh, okay. Oh, in the first. Oh, in I've got a 39-second video. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's about right. Yeah, it's not very long, but it should be a guy in armor standing up on the back of a horse.
Was it at the start or at the? Okay, I didn't find it, but I'll have a look at some point. But that's so. You
Where's my
tell
phone?
us
Go get my phone.
now. Being with a wrestler, there's some questions I want to learn. How do you trash talk, and like what brings this sort of soap opera? Why do people get drawn to it even though they know it's fake?
It depends. I'd say there's a variety of reasons. So, for example, CM comes out and shoots this interview. So, an interview that is reality based is referred to as a shoot in wrestling. So, work means that it's the planned aspect of things that you're working the audience. A shoot, oh, it might be on the chair. Go look. So he comes out on stage and does this shoot promo about how terrible the company is, how awful Vince McMahon is, but he said it in such a way that you could tell there were elements of reality in it, and it captured your attention. It captured your mind of like, wow, this is different. This is something that doesn't seem so contrived, and I just remember just absolutely being intrigued by it, and then when it got built up to the match that he's supposed to have, nobody could figure out what the finish was going to be, how the match was going to end. That's captivating. So ideally, you're trying to create these matches that nobody's going to be able to predict the finish to, but also they're going to attach themselves and invest emotionally because they believe in either the story or the cause or whatever it may be. So it just depends. Like years ago, back in the 80s, there was a wrestler, Jake the Snake Roberts, that did an angle with another wrestler, Ravishing Rick Rude. So Jake Roberts' real wife, Cheryl Roberts, was at the one of the events, and Rick goes up and starts hitting on her and getting real fresh and nasty, and Jake comes out and makes the save. But here you have an issue that any married individual can absolutely identify with somebody creeping out on their wife or something like that. So that's a story that, as they would say in the business, would draw money, you know? So you're trying to create instances of that where you're trying to build an issue between you and your partner that everybody can understand, that they want to see a result of that match or that feud between the two individuals. So that usually is how wrestling should be constructed, although in my opinion of late, wrestling has become much more of a gymnastics routine as opposed to a small reflection of physical reality. You know, like pro wrestling emulated an MMA bout to an extent. You know, where back in the day in the 90s and 80s, you know, there was a lot more realistic elements to that match, and you could suspend your disbelief a little bit. Where nowadays the wrestlers are doing so many acrobatic moves all the time, and the guy that just got smashed by somebody coming off the top rope, you know, doing some spectacular move, they pop right up like nothing ever happened, and then they go into their series of fantastic acrobatics and moves and different things like that. So wrestling is not what it used to be. So like I'm a fan that doesn't watch anymore because it's so boring to me, because there's no story for me to believe in or something for me to bite into going, oh, this is interesting. So
What do you make of how come Brock Lesnar was able to do so well in the UFC?
because he's a legit athlete. That man was a multi-time NCAA wrestling champion, a physical specimen. Like his wrestling pedigree was unbelievable. So, you know, he learned how to work what he was doing because he came from amateur wrestling directly to WWE, but then he left and sought out proper trainers. But because his wrestling was so good, more often than not, a really solid wrestler with a little bit of striking can be a very dominant force within the UFC. But then you also saw when he met an elite striker, and somebody with elite cardio like Cain Velasquez and Alistair Overeem, he got wrecked. He was taken down. But it's not to say that he was, there's no shame in losing at all. You're going to lose. That's just the nature of fighting. But again, Brock Lesnar had such a tremendous pedigree. And it's the same reason that when CM Punk tried to make the crossover, it didn't go so well for him. And again, no disrespect to him at all for getting in there and taking hold of an opportunity. But he needed many, many more years of training before he should have ever been in that cage fighting. And again, I say that with all respect. Hats off to him for getting in there and trying it and doing it. But that's just the fact of the matter is he did not have a pedigree like Lesnar.
And one thing I find interesting about wrestling is that Muhammad Ali, before he watched wrestling, he didn't used to trash talk. But as soon as he watched wrestling, he started trash talking.
Yep. Well, he figured out that's how you sell fights. That's how you get people interested in what's going on. And he was a master at it. And he's not wrong, and there's a fine line, because like some of the fighters in the UFC now talk so much garbage, it gets tiresome. It's tedious, but then other times there's like an issue that comes up where, they're a little respectful towards each other. And then at the end of it, it resolves well. Like, I don't know, you get a good mix in the UFC. But you get guys like Chael Sonnen and Conor McGregor that really mastered the art of selling the fight, and the psychology of getting, because that's the other thing about Ali is he was so good about getting into your head and messing you up before you ever got into the ring. So you were beaten before you ever got there. So
it could also have an adverse effect. I mean, look at Khabib and Conor. That was...
No, and you're absolutely correct. Or look at Kamaru Usman and Colby Covington. Colby talks so much garbage; it's just never ending. And he's so scripted and robotic. It's just he's awful to listen to. But he just talked and talked and talked, and then Kamaru, beat him down. And ended up ending that fight pretty definitively. So, again, there's something to be said about having all that belief and confidence in yourself. But there's going to come a point where you talk that much trash, eventually somebody's going to catch you. That's just the nature of it.
Yeah. That's the way it goes.
Well, it's the same thing like with jousting, and when I'm presenting shows, like we do our jousting when we're dropping lances at each other, it's legit. We're really trying to take each other out. But when we are doing other elements of the show, it's a little planned out. It's worked. We have planned ground fights. We do different stunts, things of that sort. So so you try to find the mix between the two. So knowing what I know when I go into a show, I know that in the lance passes, there's a pretty good possibility I'm going to win those because I've been doing it for a long time. I'm pretty good at what I do. But I know at other elements of the show, I'm going to set things up so that way when the guys crush me with something, it means something, right? So I'll get out there. I will say specific things to antagonize the elements of the audience or to create an idea to myself that if I do it right, that when the guys crush me at the end of it, people are going to be really happy that that they ended me. You know what I mean? Like you're playing that villain character.
Yeah.
So, it is that fine line. But again, because the element of performance, we use some of that trash. It's a bit more controlled, I guess. I guess you could say. Like I know what I'm doing with that audience that's in front of me.
Yeah, yeah. It's all about the business. Eh? You got to create a spectacle. You got to create something worth seeing.
Yeah, hopefully, if I do it right, and I think I'd like to believe that the tournaments that I've hosted and the shows that I put on, 90% of the time are highly successful, that people come back and really enjoy what we do. I could be wrong, but my perception is that people like what we do because our stands are always full. So pre-COVID anyway.
Yeah. One thing I want to leave off, is thank you for coming on a podcast. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
One thing, what would be life advice you give to your younger self, and what is a quote that you'd like to live your life by?
If I were going to talk to my younger self, I'd probably tell me to calm down a little bit, because when I was younger in my 20s, I had a lot of energy, but it also, because I was insecure about some of the things that I was doing, it would manifest itself in me being very short-tempered and a very serious lack of patience. But over the years, again, from being more comfortable with myself as a human being, but then, you know, the martial arts and everything, they really helped me settle down. So I would definitely, if I was looking at my younger self, I'd tell them, you're on a good path. You're going to have the ups and the downs. And everything that's going to happen to you up until now is going to make you who you are. But, you know, learn to appreciate the moment and don't be so quick to anger. And then definitely, if I was going to leave out with a quote, you know, live for the moment is it, you know, and it's a fine line, you know. Like, it's easy. Like, a lot of people, you know, especially like superstars or whatever that make millions of dollars, are like, oh, you know, they say that, live for that moment, you know, and you could do this and you could do that. You can be anything. And of course we all like, wow, I can make millions of dollars too. My living for the moment involved me living in a horse trailer and living with very minimal things. I gave up, you know, running water, shall we say. Like, I would have to come up with different ways to make sinks and wash stations and showers and how to make my living situation good. You know, the bed area in the horse trailer was compact. It was smaller than the room I'm sitting in now, you know, but I was happy in that space. I enjoyed that, because for not having a house, not having these different things, allowed me to go out and just live life and explore humanity, because I didn't have any bills over my head. So because I gave that up and lived minimally, it gave me the opportunity to explore my humanity more fully. So it can be done. It just is a matter of, what are you willing to give up to try and achieve a happiness that you feel you would like to have. And everybody's version of happiness is always going to be different. You know, like I said, I found mine traveling the roads and working Renaissance fairs. And through that, I found the thing that I'm most passionate about, and that's my horses and my love of training. So yeah, I definitely live for the moment, and it can manifest itself in many different ways. It doesn't have to look like, you know, The Rock or Kevin Hart or Brad Pitt or, you know, Denzel Washington and movie stars. It doesn't have to look like that. You can be just as happy and self-fulfilled living in a cardboard box if you're doing the things that bring you joy and happiness in your life. It is possible.
Yeah. Ignore material things. Just be you. Do what you enjoy doing.
Mm-hmm. At least that's what I think. But, you know, who am I?
Everyone's different. That's what makes the
Exactly.
world interesting. Now, only thing I want to say is, do you have any handles you want to plug, or anything you want to plug?
Yeah, for anybody that is ever in the Bastrop area of Texas or Austin area of Texas, and you love Renaissance festivals, when we're allowed to reopen, come see the Sherwood Forest Fair. Also, the organization that I belong to is Knights of the Grail, which you can find us at knightsofthegrail.org. And it's all about our therapy program and how we try to help veterans and first responders. For anybody that might be interested in me as a horse trainer, you can look me up on Facebook at Origins Horsemanship. And then the name of our equestrian center, where all our horses are based, is the Knights Landing Equestrian Center, which you can also find us on Facebook. And Knights of the Grail have a presence on Facebook as well. So, yeah, if you're interested in me or any of those organizations, please give us a look.
Fantastic. Send me a link in the message, and I'll post on the link. And yeah, stay safe and well, my friend.